So thanks to the organisers for letting me come and speak to you all today. I'm Sarah. I'm currently a PhD student at the Astrophysics Research Institute here at Liverpool John Moores. And today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about my journey into astronomy and my experiences of studying a STEM subject. So I'm going to break this talk down into four separate sections. Firstly, I'll discuss how I initially became interested in science and my experiences of studying STEM subjects at school. I'll then talk about my A-levels and how I applied and got into uni, and then my experiences of studying physics at degree level, and then a little bit about what I do now as a PhD student. So my earliest memory of being interested in science was probably around the age of 7 or 8. And at the time, my auntie worked in a library. So whenever books got damaged or they had too many of the same copy, the staff were just allowed to take them home. So we constantly had new books coming to our house all the time. We were always reading them. But this one in particular, for some reason, I became fascinated with it. There was stuff on planets, there was stars, galaxies, nebulae, black holes. And I think all the pretty images definitely drew me in at first. But from then on, I just became fascinated by space. I started teaching myself at the basic constellations, so I could go out and pick them out in the night sky. So for example, Orion, Cassiopeia, and the Pleiades. And these were the first ones that I went out and learned to recognize myself. So you may have seen some of these outside for yourself as well. But this was the first time I remember really being excited about astronomy. So I grew up in Birmingham and I went to Great Barr School, which was just a very, very normal secondary school. You know, it wasn't a grammar school or anything like that. And at the time that I was a pupil there, I'm not sure if it still is, but it was the largest single site secondary school in the country. So there was around 2,500 pupils, so there was a lot. And being such a big school, and it was also a specialist science and technology school, it received a lot of extra funding that was used specifically for science. So the school used this to create a group of students, so a few pupils from each year group who were showing interest in STEM subjects, and they set up additional school trips doing science-related activities. So I was a part of this group, and we did things like trips to museums. We spent afternoons off timetable teaching kids science from local disabled schools and blind schools. But one of the most memorable things that we did was meeting distinguished scientists and researchers at local universities for things like Q&A sessions. So the first few people that I remember meeting were Sir Paul Nurse, who won the Nobel Prize in 2001 for his discovery of protein molecules that control how cells divide. So this is really important for cancer research now. I actually think he also opened the central teaching labs over at the University of Liverpool when they were first built as well. So he's quite a big name. We also met Sir Alec Jeffreys, who was the first to discover inherited variation in human DNA. And this led to developing the technique of DNA fingerprinting. So obviously now that is a massive part of forensic science and criminology. And I actually managed to find the photo from this day, so that's me there. I think I'm about year 8 or year 9. And yeah, believe it or not, wearing your hair that high was actually in fashion at the time. And lastly, Commander Chris Hadfield, who was on board the International Space Station between 2012 and 2013. He spent a total of 166 days in space. And he also famously posted a video from the International Space Station to his social media of him singing Space Oddity by David Bowie. I don't know if anybody remembers that. I was in, I think, sixth form at the time when that happened. But anyway, things like this were really good opportunities for me at a young age. So it definitely further sparked my interest in science. But as I was saying, I think I was about year 8, year 9 when we started doing this. And even though I was really enjoying chemistry and I was really enjoying biology, for some reason, physics just didn't really click with me at all. And it was my least favourite of all the sciences. And I always struggled a little bit with maths too. And I always thought, well, if I was rubbish at maths, then, you know, I'm always going to be rubbish at physics too. So at this point, I didn't really think of physics as a career option or science in general as a career option. And when I thought of scientists, you know, you picture all these super smart people like Einstein and Isaac Newton, Galileo, and these are the pictures that you see quite a lot when you're at that age. And I didn't really think normal people became scientists. So at this time, I was thinking of maybe becoming a lawyer, or I was doing athletics at the time, so maybe an athlete, but science just wasn't really anything I was thinking about doing. But it wasn't until I picked my GCSE options at the end of year 9, and on the list was GCSE astronomy. And this subject had never run as a GCSE in my school before, so we just happened to be the first year group that were doing it. But I was buzzing at the thought of having lessons that were going to be specifically on space. And this GCSE went on to be a very big factor in me deciding to pursue a career in astronomy. Another massive factor was my astronomy teacher, Mr. Robertson, who was also my physics teacher during my GCSEs as well. And he noticed how much I was really enjoying the astronomy lessons, and I was always putting my hand up and asking loads of questions, staying back and asking about things that I'd read at home. But most importantly, he helped me realise that astronomy and physics really go hand in hand. As I said before, physics just didn't really click with me. I sometimes found the concepts quite difficult, and I found the maths a bit tricky. And when I said to him, oh, I really like astronomy, but I'm rubbish at maths and physics, he said, well, if you can do the maths in astronomy, then you're more than capable of being able to do it in physics too. So slowly I began enjoying my physics lessons a bit more. I got a bit more confident at putting my hand up and saying that I was stuck and needed the extra help. And by the end of year 10, I loved physics just as much as I loved astronomy, which I never thought would happen. And then one day after a lesson, he kept me back and he said, have you ever considered doing physics at university? And to be honest, I hadn't at all. He explained to me that, if you enjoy your degree, you can go on and do research afterwards if that's what you want to do. And I remember thinking, that sounds cool, doing my own research and making my own discoveries, like the ones that you read about in books all the time, thinking I could do that. Okay. So that's what I set as my goal. I was going to go to uni and I was going to study astrophysics. So having decided that this is what I wanted to do, I had a look at what I needed to do to get there. So this little diagram sort of shows the most normal and direct route that people will take to study physics and astronomy at uni. So you start off by doing your GCSEs, and then you go on, you do your A-levels, you apply to uni and do your undergraduate degree. If you enjoy that, you can go and do a master's degree. And then if you want to do research, then you can go and do a PhD. So that's kind of the basic route. But this is where my path starts to go a little bit weird. So I did my GCSEs, and then I decided to do my A-levels at the sixth form at my school. So I picked physics, chemistry and maths. However, in my first set of year 12 exams in January, I got a U in maths and a D in physics and chemistry. So I was a little bit disappointed. I had to resit these exams in the summer, and I was doing those resits alongside the new exams that I was taking that you learn throughout the rest of year 12. So by then I was taking double the amount of exams that I should have been. But I sat them, I did them, and I picked up my year 12 results, my final year 12 results in August. And again, I had a U in maths and a D in chemistry and a D in physics. So I went back to sixth form in year 13, but then I was told I wasn't allowed to carry on with maths because I had a U and I'd failed my resit also. So I had to completely resit year 12 maths, which meant that I was sat in the lessons of the year below and redoing the same stuff that I'd done before. And I did this alongside also doing the year 13 physics and chemistry. And then I also resat some year 12 physics and chemistry exams too, even though I passed them, but in order to try and boost my grade even more to try and get to uni. So at this point, I was taking so many exams and it was so stressful. And I knew at this point that I wouldn't even have enough UCAS points to get to uni because I only had half an A-level in maths and the requirements were 3 full A-levels. So I thought, right, what am I going to do? I'm going to go and ask for some help. And I went to my head of sixth form and I went to her office and knocked on the door, sat down, I explained my situation. I said, I really want to do physics at uni. My grades aren't quite where they should be. And I sort of expected her to be like, this is what you need to do. Don't worry, you're going to get there. Everything's going to be fine. But instead, she looked at my A-level grades and said, these aren't good enough for physics. There's no university that's going to look at you if you've got these grades. And then the most memorable thing she said to me was, you need to pick a more realistic career goal. So I was quickly brushed off, and that was that, really. So I remember being gutted because obviously this is what I had my heart set on. And to hear my head of sixth form say that, don't bother, it's not going to happen, it was obviously a little bit disheartening. And after being upset for a while and thinking, maybe I should just quit sixth form, I don't know, is this for me? Thankfully, I decided, I don't actually really care what this teacher thinks. I know that this is what I want to do, and I'm just going to find a different way of getting there. So I Googled alternative routes to university and read about something called a foundation year. And I'd never heard of this term before at all, but you do an extra year of study before your degree to make sure you're up to the same level as everybody that did full A-levels. Plus, I would still get to move away from home, live in halls, and have the normal student experience, which is really what I wanted. So that's what I did. I applied for a physics foundation year in Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, and London, I think it was. And this time, all I needed was a C grade in each of my subjects to get in. So that was a lot less pressure than I was putting on myself before. So on results day, I got into the University of Liverpool to do astrophysics with a foundation year, and that was great. Despite how badly my A-levels went, my foundation year actually went really well. I had to get over 70% to progress to start the actual degree, and I passed with, I think, over 80%, which was great. So when I look back at the time I was doing my A-levels, I think I just put far too much pressure on myself, took on way too much, thinking I could do all these resits and all these exams at the same time. I also started suffering with exam anxiety. So even though I was doing loads of revision and I was prepared, I would just get so stressed out and worked up on the day that I'd just end up doing badly. So this taught me a lot about the importance of taking breaks and having time away from revision during exam period, because it's really just as important as the revision itself. Overdoing it just leads to burnout. So this takes me now to my undergraduate degree, which I did here in Liverpool, which is a joint degree between the University of Liverpool and Liverpool John Moores. So there was around 80 people on the physics course as a whole, and around 20 of those were women. But of those studying specifically astrophysics, there was only four of us women. So not only was I now only one of few women in my year group, but I was also the only woman of colour. And I think being from Birmingham, which is very multicultural, I suppose that was quite strange. I'd never really been in a situation like that before. And I think these factors definitely made it more difficult for me to feel like I fit in at first. I struggled to feel confident to ask for help if I was stuck on something, both from lecturers and other students, in case they thought I was stupid or, asking silly questions and whatever. So that was something I had to learn to overcome, and to tell myself that I have the right to be here just as much as anybody else. But one thing that really helped with that was, by the time you reach your second year, you get to go on a trip to Tenerife. So this is if you do astrophysics. You get to go to Tenerife on a field trip, and you use the telescopes at the top of a mountain to look at real astronomical objects for yourself. And this experience really reaffirmed to me that this is why I'm doing this. This is why I'm here. It was such an amazing experience. So these are just some of the photos that I took from my camera from the top of the mountain. So here you're above some of the clouds and stuff as well. And you can see the big telescopes that we use over here and over here. But one of my favourite things that we did was we got to look at astronomical objects that you see in books and stuff all the time. And this was one of my favourite ones that we looked at. So this is the Eagle Nebula. And on the left here is the image that me and my group captured from the telescope during the field trip. And on the right is the same object, but taken from the Hubble Space Telescope. So you may have seen this image before, but being able to actually see these objects for yourself was pretty cool. And it was something that I really, really enjoyed doing. And one of the other best parts of the trip was the chance to do some astrophotography, which I'd never done before either. So a few examples of photos that I took. There's this one that I took on the first night of observing, and I hope you can see it as well as it looks on my laptop, but you can see just how clear the skies are when you're away from the city and other sources of light pollution. And I'd never experienced a night sky like this before, ever. I took this photo because if you look down here on the left, this really bright object, this is actually Venus. And my favorite one, I made a star trail. So for this, you set your camera up to a long exposure time so that you can capture the motion of individual stars in the sky. And this creates this sort of like streak effect that you see here. And if you leave your camera out for long enough, you get something that looks like this on the right. Sadly, this isn't my photo, and hopefully one day I'd love to take one as good as this. I only left my camera out for around half an hour, so you only see a small fraction of the motion that the stars take in the sky, but I thought that was pretty cool. So this brings me now to coming to the end of my degree. As I said, that trip was a great experience and a great reminder of why I wanted to study astronomy in the first place. The hands-on experience also really helped me personally feel confident in my own ability as an astronomer, especially after feeling a bit rubbish at the beginning of my degree. But for the rest of the experience, my third year and my master's year, I absolutely loved it. You get to choose your own modules at this stage too, so you get to have more choice on the topics that you cover, and you can really tailor it to what you enjoy learning the most. So in 2019, I graduated with a MPhys degree in astrophysics. So that is the 3 years plus the master's year. And this brings me nicely to what I'm doing now. So I started my PhD position here in October 2019. And because I particularly enjoyed the module on stars in my third year, I wanted to pick my PhD topic to be something to do with that. So my research is on red supergiant stars. And these are stars that are around 8 times the mass of the sun or more. So over here, you've got one of the most well-known red supergiants, which is called Betelgeuse, who some of you may have heard of. And this is in the constellation of Orion. So as you can see, if you compare down here to the size of the sun, red supergiants are pretty massive. So this just means that when they run out of fuel and they die in these big, great explosions that we call a supernova. So throughout my PhD, I've been looking at the luminosities of red supergiants, so how bright they are. And we look at their brightnesses and their masses and see how they change throughout their lives up until when they explode. So a few of my highlights from doing my PhD so far. Firstly, having my first astrophysics paper published that I'd written. In this work, we looked at some red supergiants in our next door neighbour galaxy, which is called the Andromeda Galaxy. And we calculated how bright they are, and we compared them to how bright other red supergiants are in other nearby galaxies. So I did this work with my PhD supervisor, Dr. Ben Davis, and Dr. Emma Beezer, who also did her degrees here in Liverpool and now has a super cool job working for NASA in Arizona. So secondly, I gave my first ever talk at a big conference. So this is on the research from this paper. I never thought I would do anything like this. It was to about 200 people. It was really scary, really crazy. So it was definitely a personal highlight for me. This was obviously done remotely because sadly, most of my PhD has been during the pandemic. But thankfully, this year, most things are back in person, which means I'll get the opportunity to travel to other countries to give talks like this and present my work to other researchers. So that is really exciting. So finally, I will leave you with a slide here of a handful of women in physics and astronomy, both from history and the present day. Because although we have these amazing women and many more to look up to, sadly, women do remain underrepresented in science, especially in physics and particularly women of colour. So hopefully with more girls enjoying science from a younger age, Eventually, it will help bridge this gap, this gender gap that exists in STEM subjects. So lastly, I'll wrap up just so I hope I don't think I'm running over. I want to leave a few take-home messages to anyone here that is interested in pursuing a career in physics or astronomy. So of course, studying a STEM subject at degree level can be challenging at times, but as is doing any degree in any job. So a lot of what my journey has taught me is passion and enthusiasm and drive and things like that were the key factors for me in the end, more so than trying to have the best grades in the class. So enjoy learning physics. And if you tick these boxes, then a STEM degree is definitely something that is achievable for you. As you've seen, I didn't get the best grades in school at all, but it never really stopped me from getting to where I wanted to be. And I absolutely love what I do now. Secondly, you learn so many skills along the way when you study science, things like problem solving, data analysis, computer programming, and they're all really useful for a wide variety of jobs. In fact, after studying a science at uni, if you don't want to go into research, there really is a broad range of jobs that you can go into. For example, data science, teaching, finance. There was someone that worked at this uni who went on to work for the Met Office, using the skills that she'd learned in physics to then help predict weather patterns. There was a girl on my undergraduate course who now works for a satellite security company, trying to find ways to make satellites more sustainable and to help with climate change. And there's another girl in my year who is now an engineer for a big aerospace company. And alongside doing that, she also has her own clothing line, which is crazy. So the possibilities really are endless when you study a science. Ask questions. This is a big one. There's no such thing as a stupid question, especially if it means you understand something better after you've asked it. So always ask questions. And lastly, and most importantly, I'd say science is for everyone. For all genders, races, ethnicities, backgrounds, science is for everyone. And I've met all kinds of people from all different backgrounds while doing my PhD, all with completely different stories of how they got into science, but that we all have the same common interest. So I think that's really cool. Thank you for listening.